Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Gaming with me, Tony Mo, and I'm here today to bring you guys my thoughts on The Division's brand new Survival DLC. I've put in some time with it today. I actually completed my very first session of a PvE match of Survival this morning, and I have a lot to say about it, a lot of good things to say about it, but let's actually start at the beginning. Unfortunately, Massive has once again hired someone straight out of high school to write the dialogue and the brief cinematic story elements that you get as you're introduced into the Survival DLC. It's terrible. And there's some awful lines from Fei Lao once again. It makes it cringe. Luckily, it doesn't last very long because eventually the helicopter that you were flying in that was supposed to take you to the Dark Zone so you could bring back these antivirals to save the world crashes after a billboard is torn open by a blizzard and wrecks your helicopter. It's pretty brutal, actually. Luckily, though, you survive because video games. And your Survival DLC experience begins. Now, this is a very session-focused experience, and that's one of the best things about it. I like DayZ, I like Rust, I like games like that, but they take hours upon hours upon hours to play, and to ever reach some sort of an end game goal and to fully experience everything, you have to put in like 20, 30 hours, if you're lucky to live that long. The Survival DLC works much more on a hour-long session-based experience. In fact, you're pretty much restricted to the amount of time that you can spend playing the Survival DLC because you are a ticking time bomb of death. So after you crash land, your mask is broken open, and you are basically exposed to this virus now. You're sick, things aren't going well for you, and if you don't extract inside the DZ and make your way back to base, you will die. So you're dealing with this hour-long counter. Now the counter can actually be slowed slightly by consuming painkillers, but you're only given 3 painkillers. So you really have to space those out. At least that seems to be the strategy according to what works best for you to try and get the most out of that timer so you can complete your objectives and hopefully extract back to safety. So this DLC actually works in 2 stages, and I really like the way they set this up. So the first stage is once you've crash landed. You have no equipment, you have a pistol, like 1 med kit, and you need to go ahead and actually craft a new mask so you can go into the Dark Zone without gagging to death. So that's your first stage, and that takes place on the base map. The idea being that it's been transformed now because you're dealing with this really treacherous, gnarly, wonderful and beautiful and atmospheric blizzard, by the way. And it really does feel like something entirely different, mostly because you can't see where the hell you're going. There does seem to be a few additions going on as well. The terrain seemed a little bit different. Of course, you have fire barrels all over the place. There are new hideouts. There are safe houses that you can go inside of now. They really did spend some time revamping this chunk of Manhattan that you've experienced once before, and it feels good. It feels like something different. Fortunately, it's a city, so when you can't see anything in a city, it feels really different, and that really does work out well. So that's the first stage. In that first stage, you're going to spend as much time as you feel is necessary to acquire the components you need to craft that mask, and then also to acquire additional gear, components, and clothing. This is completely up to you. You know what your time limit is. You see 35 minutes left? How much more time do you want to spend acquiring electronics and tools to craft abilities, or to craft weapons, or maybe you just want to search for weapons? I actually spent a pretty big chunk of time screwing around just because. I was really obsessed with trying to get to a helicopter crash site that I could never get to, but I did end up acquiring a lot of good gear. I ended up with the purple LMG, I ended up with the all blues, I got myself a really nice set of clothing that was genuinely going to keep me warm, and I was also able to craft 2 abilities. So by the time I went into the Dark Zone, I had both the support healing station as well as the healing stim. Again, my personal choice. If you want to roll the dice and go in with just like a shotgun and a couple pieces of clothing, as long as you have the mask, you can go into the Dark Zone. And you have to remember, throughout stage 1, you're dealing with the cold. You're dealing with your core body temperature dropping. There are really 2 different weather conditions that you're going to deal with. Stormy, like straight up disastrous blizzard, can't see 3 feet in front of you. And slightly less stormy, can't see 15 feet in front of you. And your core body temperature won't drop as quickly. So you'll be able to spend less time stopping at barrels and safe houses and more time traveling. A little bit of planning really does go a long way, as I learned very early on in this. You don't want to just run out into the blizzard and be like, oh, where do I go? I can't see anything. What am I looking for? There's stuff on the map, and as you get closer and closer to it, as long as your thirst and hunger has been filled up, it will start to get marked on your mini map, so you can better find safe houses. And of course, it's going to be really valuable to do some exploration, to climb some ladders, to get to some rooftops. That's how I found some of the best gear that I ended up walking into the dark zone with. But again, you're constantly working against that timer, so it's up to you. The more you explore, the more time you consume, but the better chance you have of acquiring great gear to take into the DZ with you. So that's stage 1. Stage 2 is once you jump the wall and make it into the dark zone, and there's no returning here. There's no more doors to walk through. You're jumping over the fence and you're not coming back unless it's in a body bag. So once you make it over, you now have to actually go out and find supplies once again. You might have found enough of those supplies out in the first stage to craft a flare gun. That flare gun, of course, is going to allow you to extract. So here's what goes on in the second stage inside of the dark zone. Number 1, you can choose to acquire the antivirals. That's going to give you, I think, more points, and of course, that's the main purpose of your mission. You could just straight up extract and try and get out. That's up to you as well. At the same time, there's legitimate loot to be found in the dark zone. So unlike the first stage where you're only acquiring loot that matters for the survival session, there are sealed caches that contain gear score relevant equipment that you can take back out into the world with you and open up for sick loot. So that's a pretty big drawing point to fill up your satchel of contaminated goodies to try and extract with you. Of course, spending more time in the dark zone increases your chances to be killed or eliminated by PvE threats. There are high-level named enemies in the dark zone. You're still dealing with weather, you're still dealing with thirst and hunger, you're still dealing with your infection. You still are on that timer. So again, the odds are constantly stacked against you. Time. You are very much functioning on borrowed time. Roll the dice. Search for as much gear as you want, but remember, eventually, you need to extract, and that takes a bit of time within itself. So let's talk a little bit about how my session of survival ended. I did make it into the dark zone, as you guys have been watching. You can see me there now. My plan was to go up north, grab the antivirals, and then try and make it all the way down to the bottom to an extraction zone where I felt it would be safest. In my head, I'm thinking like I'm in the traditional DZ, and I know that down south is where the lowest level enemies are, and of course, I'm just more comfortable with those extraction zones, which, by the way, are completely different. There's no more hidden fancy extraction zones. I think there's only like 2 or 3 extraction zones in total now in the dark zone, so you don't have a lot of choices. I eventually realized that I was nowhere near that. I had cheated death twice at this point, including the one time when I grabbed the antivirals, and several times actually after that when I was in extremely low health. Fortunately, I crafted that support station, that healing stim. So I went with the closest possible extraction point. I made it there, I fired my flare gun up in the air, the timer started counting down. 2 minutes and some seconds. Isaac says, incoming enemy reported. I lock myself into cover, I keep checking my 6. Where are they? I'm waiting for Rikers, I'm waiting for LMB, I'm waiting for the yellow named enemy to show up. I'm waiting for someone to ruin my day. Which, by the way, at this point, I'm the last person left on the server. It's a pretty cool feeling, actually, watching people die off. And when you solo queue into a PvE server, it gets to the point where you're actually really sad that everyone died, and you wish that there were people in the dark zone that you could team up with. I felt so alone as the last person, thinking to myself, man, if I only had bothered to help some of those other people along the way, I could have 2 or 3 people here, and we could make it out no problem at all. But now I'm alone, and there's no one left, and my chances of survival are slim to none. Such a weird psychological situation, and it really made me fall in love with this DLC all of a sudden. Back to the story, though. Eventually, I see a streak blur in front of me, and I thought it was another player, but I'm like, no, I'm the only one left. And then I think to myself, it's a rogue agent, an AI rogue agent, it has to be. Sure enough, it's this dude called the Hunter, who's this crazy rogue agent with crazy high-tech gear. He's like freaking phase shifting across my screen. I'm trying to fight him, I'm engaging him, I almost get his health down. He starts to heal himself with a healing station. I get cocky, I completely screw up, and I go down. He walks up, takes a survival hatchet, and puts it right in my face. And I lay there for 5 minutes. Because I could have been revived. I was hopeful that the helicopter would show up, and AI would get out and res me, and we'd escape with the antivirals to victory, but that wasn't the case. I had died. It was brutal, it was frustrating, and it was wonderful. This is honestly, I think, my favorite like session-based survival experience that has ever been made. And I really don't think there's anything like this, you know? It's this odd combination of the experience from some of my favorite roguelikes, my replayable roguelikes, and some of my favorite open world survival games. Just crammed into this wonderful session-based experience that is chock full of beautiful atmosphere, amazing music, by the way, the synth soundtrack. I don't know if they added new music for the Dark Zone for the sake of the survival DLC, but the music was constantly incredible. It was heart-pumping, it was tense, it was a lot of fun. And I sat there for about 4 or 5 minutes really thinking about what had just happened. Really not knowing what the end result was going to be. I had lost my sealed caches, I didn't escape with the antivirals. How was I going to be scored? I let the timer run all the way out, and then I finally was kicked out of the session. As it turns out, you're rated and you're scored at that point. I was level 3, I actually was rated as being a skilled player, and I was still given loot. So you are still given loot. Loot that is gear score relevant. So I actually got multiple caches that contained gear score 256 items, which is the new max gear score. So you're rewarded either way. There's this incredible sense of competition, even in the PvE one where you're not able to shoot other players. But that sense of competition quickly goes away as you're the last person left in the Dark Zone and you realize that you could have used the assistance of those people for survival. I'm waiting for that moment when an entire server groups up and just crushes this DLC in PvE. I think that would be absolutely hilarious. So after a couple minutes of really thinking, I wanted to go right back in. Unfortunately, I needed to sit down and talk about my experience with you guys, give you guys my first impressions for this video. This was just solo. I mean, there's just nothing like this on the market. That's the thing I keep coming back to, that is we really don't have an experience like this session-based survival experience. It's not super hardcore, it's not DayZ, but there's just enough going on in terms of micromanaging, actual survival elements, you know, dealing with the cold weather, dealing with thirst and hunger, which, by the way, they don't deplete, they don't cause your death, they actually improve your awareness. So if you're thirsty, you won't be able to identify things in your area as much. You won't be able to see caches and little crates. So staying hydrated, staying full will improve your health regeneration, it will improve your ability to regenerate your core body temperature, and it will improve your ability to find boxes and loot crates and, you know, things with electronics and tools and weapons in them. Of course, throughout this entire thing, you're dealing with PvE enemy threats. So when we talk about the PvP mode, I don't know how much fun that could be. It was honestly stressful enough, and surviving is not easy against PvE threats, especially early game. And I could see if you went into the Dark Zone unprepared, even prepared, I was pretty well geared as a solo player, it's super easy to that's it, you're done, you're dead. You know, so having other players in the mix that are more than likely just going to shoot on sight doesn't sound that fun to me, but I do believe I will eventually give it a go. Nonetheless, if you pick up the survival DLC standalone, it is more than worth the money for just the solo or cooperative PvE aspect of it. If you like survival games and you like The Division, this is the best of both worlds baked into this wonderful session-based experience. It's going to give you guaranteed gear score, relevant loot. It's going to push you up to the new max gear score. And of course, patch 1.5 comes alongside of it. So you've got a new world tier to deal with out in the single player and the cooperative experience. You've got new stuff to go into the Dark Zone, new named weapons. The Division's back, man. And Massive's done a really good job. I'm really, really happy with the survival DLC, and I can't wait to play more. If you guys have any questions for me, any concerns in regards to this DLC, anything I didn't talk about that you'd like me to answer, feel free to throw a question down in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.